Shoplifting. Is that okay to do? Now look, I work on a platform owned by corporate oligarchs. I can under no circumstances advocate committing crimes. At least, not the ones that corporate oligarchs don't like. I could advocate hate crimes all I wanted, but I don't want to do that. It is against the rules to advocate for normal criminal behavior, and it's actually enforced, so I would get in trouble. I could potentially lose my livelihood and my ability to support my family, which is kind of ironic given that, 95% of the content on this platform is itself stolen. I definitely couldn't show video evidence of me performing a crime. That would be a serious no-no. And that puts me in an interesting ethical position because, obviously, sometimes crimes are the right thing to do. Sometimes. There are plenty of extreme circumstances I could point to throughout history where virtually everyone can agree that it was morally permissible, even necessary, to defy an unjust law. Nobody's going to seriously suggest something like the Underground Railroad was immoral simply because it was illegal. And anybody that does suggest that is probably just a garbage. Now, I'm sure you could craft some devil's advocate using some absurdly strict principle and gussy it up with a half-baked appeal to a moral imperative so it sounds like you're not just being a weird racist contrarian, but nobody's gonna buy that. You're just being a garbage. Get a hobby, try knitting. But shoplifting is not really that kind of circumstance, is it? It's a bit of a gray area. That's the type of crime that virtually everyone has at least some experience with, even if they've never done it themselves. So everyone's got an opinion on it, and it can get pretty heated. Oddly enough, a lot of shoplifting discourse seems to get heated specifically because somebody made a comic strip about shoplifting, either a good, based comic, or a bad, cringe comic. And, if someone makes a comic you disagree with, you don't gotta be shitty to them, just leave them alone. Everyone agrees that there are, of course, times when it is morally permissible to steal. If you're starving, nobody expects you to just die about it. Most people would not judge you for stealing a loaf of bread to feed your hungry family. Everyone except, the food professor, of course. But reasonable people wouldn't hold that against you. So for the sake of arguing, let's ignore shoplifting that is done strictly to survive. We can agree on that much, I think. I'm not really interested in appealing to the type of trash brain who wouldn't agree with that. If you think people should die rather than steal a loaf of bread, I just gotta question your moral priorities. Likewise, I think most people can agree that stealing from small businesses is, at the very least, less defensible than stealing from big corporations. Obviously, not all quote-unquote small businesses are created equal, but there's clearly a difference between stealing from a local business and, Best Buy. We could get into a whole discussion about gentrification here and how small business is a term that's often used as a smokescreen for a sort of petite bourgeois assimilation of places that poorer people had once lived. Nothing is simple, everything is complicated, but generally, we can agree, I think, that it's worse to steal from Dave's Cool Soup Store than from Walmart. So, we will focus here on stealing from big corporate chains, since that's what most people tend to argue about anyway. That's one concession per side of the debate, which should equal out, but I'm sure will make both sides feel as though I'm selling them short. From henceforth, unless I specify otherwise, when I say shoplifting, I am referring specifically to stealing from a big corporate chain for fun and/or profit, or some reason other than strict necessity. Is that the most typical form of shoplifting? Probably not, but it's the one that I'm most interested in arguing about. Once again, even if, hypothetically, I believed that shoplifting was based and/or slime-pilled, I could not advocate for it directly. Even if I could, I'm not sure I'd want to be responsible for you making that kind of choice on account of jail. Whether or not I think shoplifting is ethical kind of puts aside the issue of whether or not it is a good idea to do. Please use appropriate caution and do not base major life decisions about what crimes you should or should not commit based on what a YouTuber talking head told you. This is an opinion piece. So you can't show this video in court. They won't accept it. Pro-shoplifter people, and full disclosure, this is the side I tend to be more sympathetic with, in case you couldn't tell already, will claim that anti-shoplifters are just bootlicking sycophants brainwashed into believing corporate propaganda. And if that's the case, maybe then we should try to be a little sympathetic to people who are affected by said propaganda, because I don't think it makes a lot of sense to get angry at someone for believing something they have been brainwashed about. Anti-shoplifting people tend to argue that shoplifting is bad for the vulnerable employees of large corporations, that the cost of shoplifting trickles down and harms innocent people, that shoplifters may believe their crimes are victimless, or at the very least, the victims of their crimes are people who kinda deserve it, but that's just a convenient excuse to justify doing whatever suits their selfish impulses. Right away, I think we can see some common ground here. Putting aside, for now, the issue of who exactly, if anyone, is hurt by shoplifting, it seems like we already agree that if it were to affect only the bottom line of rich corporations, that'd be more or less fine. Even if you think it's bad in some abstract sense, it's hard to get mad about, like, 'cause who cares? The harm only matters if and when that harm begins to affect regular people, who might actually lose something in the process, when the company passes the damage down to their employees rather than absorb it themselves. I think, though, the degree to which this actually happens is dramatically overstated. Anyone who's ever worked one of these jobs can tell you they're paying you as little as they can possibly get away with, no matter what. They don't give a shit if their employees are preventing shoplifters. They're gonna squeeze them as hard as they can, period. To wit, the greatest form of theft is almost universally not shoplifting, not robbery, not car theft, but wage theft. And, that's putting aside the theft of surplus value in the first place, like all wage labor could be said to be a form of theft. Also, we don't tend to count in these studies the theft of, say, a continent. Often this is framed around the idea of how theft will affect a store's bonuses, or the rate that they give out raises, or the hours they give their workers, or whatever, and the idea that companies would be willing to pay their employees more money if they didn't have to deal with the loss to their profit margins caused by shoplifting is extremely naive in my opinion. Because why would they? Why wouldn't they just keep the money? That's what they're trying to do, to have all of the money. Likewise, the idea that they might reduce their hours or hire fewer people as a result of shoplifting losses operates on the same assumption that a company would, for whatever reason, be willing to pay more than it absolutely needed to pay as, what? A reward for good behavior? They will always operate with as few people as they feel they can get away with. In fact, if anything, the threat of shoplifting probably incentivizes them to have more employees working at any given time. For decades now, people have been predicting that the rise of automated checkouts would result in huge losses of entry-level jobs in the service sector. Turns out it didn't, specifically because these companies still want people around on account of shoplifting. So, therefore, it could be argued shoplifters are job creators. As an aside here, Walmart makes money from their employees. That's why there's a Walmart. What we call Walmart is like a legal abstraction, an entity that exists solely to profit from the labor of others. Walmart doesn't do things, it gets other people to do things and then takes the money. Without others doing that labor, there isn't a Walmart. The idea that if Walmart starts losing money, that they're going to start firing people rests on the assumption that hiring people is like a favor Walmart is doing for them. As though Walmart hires employees to give back to the community instead of needing those workers to function. I think it speaks to a wider assumption about the way that corporations have trained us to look at jobs, as though we should be grateful for them, for the opportunity for them to profit off of us, when in reality, of course, they benefit from the work far more than we do. We work, and then they get to have money from that work for nothing. This is perhaps a discussion for another day, or, in another sense, a discussion for every day. I digress. That's not to say that I think that theft poses no danger to retail workers. They could be forced into dangerous positions where they have to confront desperate people who might attack them. Though the obvious question that arises from that scenario is, hey, why do you think those people are so desperate in the first place? They could themselves be blamed for the theft. They could be the subject of disciplinary action for failing to prevent a theft. Longtime viewers might know that this actually happened to me. I worked at a gas station Pizza Hut. I made a video about it. Pretty exciting stuff. And when that gas station, which contained that Pizza Hut, was robbed, I done got fired about it. I've also worked many other jobs where theft was a thing that happened all the time, and you just kind of wrote it off and went on with your day. But this time I did lose my job, because they said that they claimed that I left the keys in the back door, something I don't remember doing, but whether or not anything was stolen, they'd still probably want to fire me about that, on account of I'm personally deeply incompetent. Either way, it strikes me as a little unwise to tacitly accept that if these companies use the threat of harming their workers as leverage, to just let them have whatever they want. To teach them that when they threaten their workforce, we'll just do what they say? We wouldn't accept that logic when it comes to any other sort of action taken against a company. They might make similar threats if workers threaten to unionize, or people threaten to boycott, or a journalist gave them bad publicity. Hey, you can do that if you want, but if you do, we're gonna have to start letting people go, and is that what you want? Would that make these actions similarly anti-worker? I don't think so. Still, that feels a little cold-hearted, doesn't it? Like what? I'd be willing to let someone lose their livelihood over some ideological point? I could just not steal Ice Age and Ice Age 2 on DVD Blu-ray combo disc, and nobody would get hurt as a result. In the other examples I gave, if you didn't take the risk to the workforce, something bad might happen. Nothing bad happens if I don't steal Ice Age and Ice Age 2 on DVD Blu-ray combo disc, aside from the relatively marginal harm of me not getting to enjoy both movies. Well, in this hypothetical, the shoplifter isn't the one choosing to cost someone their livelihood, really. It's the employer that chooses to do that. At worst, I suppose you could argue perhaps that the shoplifter created the conditions that make that choice necessary, that in this hypothetical, the shrink caused by the shoplifting outweighed the profit value of the worker's labor, and frankly, I don't really buy that argument at all. It implies that it's our responsibility to safeguard the profit margins of big businesses, lest they have cause to fire their employees. If your local Walmart goes out of business, every single person there is out of a job. If you find out that your local Walmart is not doing so well profit-wise, is it therefore morally incumbent on you to financially support them? Is it your responsibility to safeguard their profitability in order to make sure that people don't lose their jobs? Are you likewise ethically compelled to spend your money at every business you can, lest those businesses also lose money and have to let employees go? No, right? Like that would be ridiculous. Nobody would expect you to believe that. So then, I ask you, what is the difference between allowing Walmart to go out of business passively and actively harming their bottom line? If allowing that harm to happen passively is fine, would ignoring a shoplifting in progress be likewise a morally neutral act? I would imagine that if you believed shoplifting was bad, you'd probably think people have a responsibility to stop it when they see it, right? As the logic goes, the shoplifting hurts the store's profit margins, and something that hurts the employees. But wouldn't that imply you also have a responsibility to spend money at any business that you know to be in the red, if indeed the justification here is preserving the jobs and livelihoods of the workers at that business? Now, at this point, you'd be forgiven for asking, hey, why is this guy talking like a fucking space alien? Those things are not comparable. It's just wrong to take shit that isn't yours. It isn't wrong to not want to spend your money at a business. What are you talking about? What's even your point? Yeah, okay. Fair enough. I recognize that this discussion is a little abstract, and that most of us take it for granted that theft is, in principle, just a bad thing to do. In a couple of popular religions, God wrote it in the list of main things to keep in mind. And while we don't always see eye to eye, I happen to agree with God on this matter. Theft hurts people. Theft is harmful. Theft is, generally speaking, bad. The thing that makes it bad is that you're hurting somebody by taking their shit, and then they don't have their shit anymore. A lot of pro-shoplifter arguments try to pretend like no harm is being done here, that shoplifting is a victimless crime, and I think that's kind of dancing around the truth. Of course, big corporations are harmed by shoplifting, because even if they're insured, the more they have to write off their inventory, the more their premiums go up, right? Like, you are causing harm to them. To which I might reply, sick, tight. That's what I wanted, actually. It is my opinion that where possible, it is good to harm monolithic corporations. I view the act of harming them, all other things being equal, as a positive thing to do. Walmart getting to have all of its shit, getting to keep that shit without that shit being stolen, creates more harm in the world and to innocent people, specifically to Walmart workers, than the act of stealing it ever could. Walmart, or any of these companies, got rich in the first place by stealing from all of us, and then using that stolen wealth to further manipulate state legislators into letting them exploit and rob us even harder, to lobby for suppressed minimum wages, to curtail workers' rights, to forestall health and safety regulations or environmental regulations. The more money and power they possess, the more they will abuse it to further their interests, which, for the record, means taking everything, taking all of the shit on the planet, all of the things, having it all. Basically, if I could boil down my entire economic belief structure into a couple of sentences, it'd be this. Whether or not you choose to participate, you were, at birth, enlisted in a war to determine who has all of shit. On one side is everybody, all of us, me, you, your dad. The other side is a few guys. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Scrooge McDuck, people like that. The few guys are winning that war right now. In a war, sometimes things that would normally be morally abhorrent become a matter of tactical necessity, a matter of survival. I think of all of the ways that war can be waged, shoplifting is the one that these shitheads should be rooting for because the rest are going to be a lot worse for them. Here's a question that doesn't seem to come up as much in this discussion, a perhaps more fundamental question that seems to get ignored. How come the shit at Walmart belongs to Walmart? And again, I'm not a space alien. I don't mean legally. I know that they own their stuff. I know that it's their stuff and the police won't let me have it. I mean morally, ethically. How come? Walmart's not using it, they don't need it, why is it theirs? What moral utility does it serve that they're allowed to have it? Like, for example, I would argue that the moral basis that I get to own a Nintendo is that if somebody took it, I would be sad about that. I wouldn't be able to use my Nintendo and do the things I like to do with it. By stealing my Nintendo, you have had a direct effect on my life. Furthermore, I think owning one Nintendo is a perfectly sensible portion of Nintendos to own. I don't own an unfair portion of Nintendos, I'm owning the expected amount for my needs. If I instead had 10,000 Nintendos sitting in a warehouse somewhere and someone stole one of them, wouldn't really cause me a lot of distress or pain. Wouldn't really affect me either way, because I can still play Monster Party. I'm good. Now, so too can the guy who stole that Nintendo. They can also play Monster Party, and that's kind of a net good, don't you think? Don't you think we should organize society such that anyone who needs to play Monster Party should be able to, rather than a few people or businesses having exclusive access to the means of playing Monster Party? I'm sure some economists, who should log off, would point out that, like, okay, sure, but Nintendo only makes Nintendos because they can sell them at big retailers like Walmart. Walmart's gotta have that stuff because that's how the market distributes goods to people. If we stopped paying for goods, what would incentivize Nintendo to make Nintendos? Who would manufacture and distribute Nintendos? Also, less importantly, all other goods. And like, I don't want to overstate my case here, but here's why all of economics is fake. It's a fake idea for rubes and fools, and there are literally no worthwhile ideas to be understood from the entire field of economics. Every economist you've ever heard of is a fraud. We would still make Nintendos because we like to have Nintendos. They're nice. Nintendo actually stopped making Nintendos like decades ago, and people still make them all the fucking time. People build enormous, expensive infrastructure to preserve and maintain abandoned software for Nintendos at great personal risk. They do it better than Nintendo does, despite Nintendo making millions of dollars from getting to do it. You literally could not stop people from making Nintendos if you tried. I know this because Nintendo has tried. And that is true of literally every single consumer good you can think of. It is someone's passion to make, to the extent that they would give up everything in their life for the chance to do it for a living, and they would find a way to do it better and more efficiently than any business could ever hope to. Also, hundreds of other people would find doing it pretty interesting and fun if they were allowed to do so on their own terms. People, literally, for fun, play video games about long-haul trucking, and you're seriously trying to make the argument that without the profit incentive, nobody would want to do a boring job, like trucking, or cleaning public infrastructure, or farming. Hey economists, what are you talking about? Why are you like this? Why do I have to keep explaining to you, economists, that accomplishing things feels good? Get the fuck out of here, economists, for real. What the fuck, you guys? But somehow, the Walmarts of the world have convinced us that if they weren't there to own everything before we owned it, why would anyone make anything? Why wouldn't everyone just sit around bored and sad and hungry and then die about it? Can you think of a reason? Probably the only way to prevent that is if the already richest people in the world continue to be rich forever. So if you mess with that process, probably there's no stuff anymore, and we're gonna have to fire everybody. So in order to maintain this sacred order, we simply must prosecute some teen who stole over-the-counter cough medicine because they read online he could get high from it, but they didn't even buy the right kind. Way to go, Tyler. It is the price we pay for living in a society.
It's all about the greater good.
The greater good. How can this be for the greater good? The greater good.
In reality, if all Walmarts had to shut down and every single Walmart worker lost their jobs, that might suck for them in the short term, but in the long term, they'd benefit from the absence of a company like Walmart finding more and more ways to exploit them and people like them. There is no method of resistance to capital that capital won't find a way to defer the costs of onto labor, and so we have to be willing to make sacrifices if we want to fight back. They're never going to just take it, and so neither should we. How about instead of allowing these companies to hold their workers hostage, we preemptively develop material infrastructure of mutual aid to support workers who get caught in the crossfire, so that however we choose to fight back, they can't hold the livelihood of their workers over our heads. And look, we're getting a little grandiose here. Make no mistake, I don't view shoplifting as some grand gesture of revolutionary praxis. I don't think that by pocketing a few items from a big box store, you're bringing us any closer to a communist utopia in any meaningful way. I just simply can't muster a single iota of a shit about these companies losing inventory. I simply can't. It's maddening to me to even engage in this discussion. Is shoplifting ethical? Here's the real answer. Who fucking cares? If shoplifting is harmful, it's a drop in the fucking bucket. It's a drop in the ocean of harm we all live with by simply being alive right now during the harmingest times. You cause more misery, harm to workers, and tacitly support more cruelty every single time you buy from one of these companies than stealing from them could ever do. It is fundamentally worse. I'm meant to believe that you're somehow preventing harm to workers by materially supporting the biggest worker harmers there have ever been? It's complete backwards brain shit, frankly. It's like complaining that people are stealing blood from Dracula. And even if you believe that shoplifting is immoral, I have to ask, do you seriously think it's immoral enough to care? That it's more immoral than, like, buying a cell phone that was manufactured with rare earth minerals, probably mined by slaves, like I and all of you absolutely have done and will most likely continue to do at those stores? Or have you perhaps been told to believe that by the people who stand to benefit from one immoral act and lose out from another? Why do you think one elicits such strong reactions while the other is seen as just an unfortunate fact of life? Hey, what are you gonna do about it? That's how people talk. Two wrongs don't make a right, I know, but like, if you were to insult and hurt the feelings of a serial arsonist, you know, it's wrong to hurt people's feelings, sure, but one of those wrongs is kind of drowned out in light of the other, don't you think? It's a huge waste of time, energy, and passion to condemn what is, at its very worst, a public nuisance committed against some of the most powerful organizations to ever exist. So if you see someone shoplifting, no, you didn't. Thank you for watching this video from me, Thought Slime. I made it for you. Please like and slime-scribe. You can go to patreon.com/thoughtslime, which is where people go to pay me for these videos. If you watch it without paying, it is technically stealing, which is fine if you agree with me. But if you disagree with my opinions expressed in this video and you don't pay me on Patreon, then you're a hypocrite. Also, if you use adblock. Nobody who agrees with me is under any obligation to pay. But if you don't agree, if you don't pay, then you've been hoisted by your own petard. No eyeball zone this week. Eyeball zones is sometimes food. I just want to be done making this one now so I can go make another one for you.